Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast, a production of neonewstoday.com. I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. In today's episode of the Smart Economy Podcast, we were joined by Jon Trask, the founder and CEO of Dimitra, an ag tech company that leverages cutting edge and innovative technologies to empower farmers and also help banks and governments learn more about how farming can improve the lives of its citizens. In this episode, we spoke about Jon's career in supply chains, how Dimitra leverages blockchains to empower farmers, how Dimitra's analytics are of value to governments and banks, the various different types of technologies the platform integrates, so many different types of use cases, and much more. Just a reminder, nothing said on this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, and that nothing should be taken as financial advice. The host or guests may hold tokens discussed in any given episode, and you can learn more about these tokens and other holdings through our disclaimer at neonewstoday.com. I really enjoyed this conversation with Jon, and I hope you enjoy it too. Today, we're joined by Jon Trask, the founder and CEO of Dimitra, which is an ag tech company that's leveraging cutting-edge technology to help farmers increase yields, reduce expenses, and mitigate risks, amongst many other really interesting niches that I can't wait to dig into. So Jon, welcome to the pod. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic. Thanks for having me here today with Dylan.
Yeah, I'm really excited to kind of dig into what Dimitra is working on. I live in Colorado. There is a lot of agriculture and agricultural companies that are here. It's a big part of the economy of the state. And there's a large blockchain community here. And the convergence of the two often means that we talk about ag tech. So I think you're the first guest that we've had on the pod to delve into this realm, and I'm just really excited to get started. So I kind of want to start with like a very high level question and kind of go from there. So when we're talking about blockchain and smallholder farms, one of the ways that I've always been interested in seeing the convergence of the two is how blockchain can benefit and empower small scale farmers, maybe as part of the supply chain, or maybe to reduce the overhead that they have to maintain. I have never really been too certain of what the actual benefits are. So I'm just curious, how does blockchain technology empower and make lives easier for smaller scale farmers?
Yeah, so there's probably three key ways that we use blockchain within our application to help the farmers. The first one is for traceability. So everybody wants to know the provenance of their food, and they want to be able to tell, where was it grown? How was it transported? Where was it processed? And so that whole farm to fork scenario. And so within our app, we do that. We write specific pieces of information to blockchain and share that with the network or the supply chain so that there's transparency within the supply chain, and they can choose to use that how they want. The second way is we have a real world asset trading platform. So last year we ran a couple trials. Our first trial was in Kenya, and we planted 1,000 avocado trees for farmers, and we sold those as NFTs. And essentially you can go in, use our token, buy an NFT. When you buy an NFT on the next launch in May, essentially you own 20% of a avocado tree. The farmer in Kenya owns 80% of the avocado tree. And over the years, as the avocado tree grows, it creates revenue, and you get 20% of that revenue comes back to you. It starts as Kenyan shillings, but then it gets on-ramped and converted back, and you get paid out in DMTR. So that's another method where we're using crypto and blockchain. And then lastly, another big piece of the whole blockchain scenario for us comes into the use of our app. So we have a number of applications, and within the applications, we manage identity with blockchain. We manage other specific information. We do a ton of AI in our company. And so there's specific data that we want to capture, and we want to share outputs of that, particularly in the area of deforestation. So there are new laws in the world around deforestation. The EU has a new law which has already come out, and everybody that's producing coffee, cocoa, soybeans, rubber, timber, anything with cattle and palm oil must report that they are deforestation free if they're going to export to the EU. So we have just processed the first EU compliant transaction. It was coffee going from Peru to Germany. And all of the data within that transaction is gathered and it's written to blockchain through our app so that the farmer and the members of the supply chain have a certificate to prove using AI to evaluate the farm that that farmer has not deforested. And starting in January of next year with those commodities, all of those supply chains must be compliant.
Awesome. So there's a ton in there that I can't wait to dig into. But when you were talking about the NFTs for the avocado farmers, that kind of sentiment is exactly what got me excited about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency to begin with, that there's a large portion of the world that are unbanked. And now with the advent of cryptocurrency and blockchain networks, we got to leapfrog technology and basically skip over the banks and connect the rest of the world to a global commercial marketplace, so long as they have a cell phone and access to the internet, which everyone does today. So that kind of genesis of how you can empower like avocado farmers in various different countries throughout the African continent really resonates with me, because that sort of thought process was what made it possible for me to leave my previous career as an urban planner and go into blockchain. So with that said, when was the first time you heard about Bitcoin or Ethereum or cryptocurrency or blockchain at all? And did you buy into it immediately, or did it take a couple of years for you to have your aha moment?
So I started programming very early in my life, and cryptography was a piece of that. In 2011-ish, I probably heard quite a bit about Bitcoin and I bought some. And I don't know at that point that I was completely bought into it, but I was dabbling or speculating in it. And that was my first moment. I really got heavily involved probably about 2017 and 2018, where I was consulting on different projects and looking at how do you apply blockchain to enterprises.
So you actually have associations or ties to a wide variety of blockchain associations like Blockchain Training Alliance, Kryptonite, Government Blockchain Association. Shout out to GBA. John Carpenter actually brought me on to be a speaker at one of their conference events. And I actually got to learn a lot about enterprise blockchain and how enterprises were looking at blockchain. And this was back in 2019. So really cool to hear that you have these ties. And I have personally taken away a lot of information and value from GBA. So you have these involvements with these numerous blockchain associations, which cater towards educating business organizations and enterprise-like clients. So can you just share a little bit more about your roles with these entities and the kind of educational efforts they do and you've done on behalf of them?
Yeah. So a number of years ago, I had a consulting company and we did a lot of training with colleges and universities on blockchain and AI and application development. I had a team of instructors, worked with the Blockchain Training Alliance in California. They had built some curriculum and licensed that curriculum in order to run these training sessions. So they built great stuff. And, you know, nearby to you, Blockchain Beard Guy lives in Colorado, or at least he lived in Colorado at that point. And he was making a lot of that material. Man. Same thing with the Blockchain Research Institute. And we've been involved in some research projects with them and some educational stuff around that. And GBA, my involvement as a member of GBA is that I, sit on some of their working groups that we help write materials and implement materials and speak about materials. So, Gerard, who runs GBA, does a great job with the message around the world. And I've been involved in a few things, and, Blockchain Research Institute and GBA both gave me an award in the last couple of years for some of the work I've done. So I'm grateful to them for recognizing some of my work.
Yeah. And shout out to Gerard. He's just a really nice guy. If you ever get to meet him in person, definitely go chat with him. He's more than happy to chat with anyone. You kind of touched on when you first got involved with these educational organizations that you were dealing with a lot of students in universities. Do you still have ties to students in universities? Do you still kind of collaborate with different universities? What does that look like today?
So we do on a different front. Back then we were teaching technology and helping people become blockchain programmers. Now our interaction is more from a rollout perspective. So I'll give you an example. We have a deal with Andalas University in Indonesia, and we have a need to train farmers on how to use our platform. It's tough to do that on the side of a mountain in Sumatra in Indonesia. And so we had arranged a deal there where they got a grant from the government for training. They gave us access to a number of students who went through Dimitra school or Dimitra Academy, learned about our platform. We taught it right at their university. And then they went to the field with thousands and thousands of coffee farmers and taught them how to use the application and how to register and how to transact and get traceability. And that was the big challenge that cooperative originally was working on was Solacraggio. They needed to provide traceability back to the farm for their customers in Europe and North America. So the schools play a big role in that. And, that was a great initiative. We got, I think, 30 students for 30 days who went out and trained a couple thousand farmers to get them up on the system. And now we've replicated that a few times in South America and in other areas.
That's super cool. I had the opportunity to tour in late 2022, a wide variety of universities here in the US to talk about building careers in Web3. And I noticed that the most active students didn't necessarily come from the computer science colleges, but also finance, arts, business, things like this. So would you say that a lot of the educational efforts you did, particularly with Dimitra Academy, were multidisciplinary? Or were you dealing with students who might have been in agricultural colleges, or were you dealing with computer science students who were going out and getting their hands dirty for the first time?
So we offered two types of training. One is very technical, where you need that background. You need a basic programming background in order to take the course. And then secondly is about how do you apply blockchain and AI to agriculture. So, we ran a number of sessions. We've had ministers of agriculture and deputy ministers of agriculture, farmers right through marketing and sales and finance take these courses. And, they all have an interest. They read a little bit about Web3. They read a little bit about blockchain. I guess their decision-making process in life is how do they apply technology to their interests? And sometimes it's just purely general interest. They want to learn a little bit more about blockchain, where others are already advanced in their career and trying to figure out how does blockchain fit into what they do. I think we had 60 people from 60 different ministries and countries around the world in agriculture. And they're trying to see how AI and blockchain and IoT fit and how their governments can adopt them and start working with their farmers. So we offered the training at that point free of charge. And so we just got a myriad of people and it led to some really great conversations around what different people are doing in different countries.
That's super cool. I think when maybe a lot of your crypto native audience starts hearing things like AI, maybe they're thinking about the image generator or the recent release a month or two ago of the ability for AI to create super realistic looking videos. But AI can also historically, what AI or machine learning has been used for was scraping through wide swaths of data. So can you just give a little bit of an example or help paint the picture for just how large some of these data sets might be that governments or regional farmers are dealing with, and how it might have been too much of a task or too much overhead for them to scrape and look through that data and make anything of it? And how is AI kind of changing the game today or empowering these folks in ways that they wouldn't have been able to maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah, so if you talk about the first problem that we're trying to address, which is deforestation, we start with satellite data. And we need to look at the world's forests and we create a digital twin of the world's forests. So think about all of the countries in the world that, grow those crops that I mentioned earlier, coffee and cocoa and the others, and how much land that takes. We're talking about 570 million farms in the world. And a large number of those farms need to be able to produce a report to say that they're deforestation free. And that's a new law starting in January of this year. Everybody needs to comply. And so when I take that data set, we're looking at a satellite image that changes every day of a very large percentage of the Earth's surface. And we need to evaluate the changes in the forest and the changes on the farms. So the digital twinning process is huge. It would take me thousands or tens of thousands of people to do that manually, where with machine learning and spectral imagery coming from the satellites, we can take 20 or 30 spectrums of light, which each return a different amount of data. And for the purposes of the new EU law, look at their cutoff date, which was the end of 2020, that they'll no longer buy deforested products, to today, and evaluate the changes on the farm, and then try to determine if those changes violate any of the new regulation, because some change is acceptable, but not all change. So there's complexities where we need to be able to evaluate the approximate height of the tree with a satellite, which is quite difficult to do. The potential growth of the tree. So is it part of the forest, or will in the next few years it become part of the forest because it reaches a certain height criteria? The canopy density and the number of trees in a certain area. And then we have to evaluate, which is much more difficult to do, the difference between a forest tree and perhaps an agricultural tree. And so AI makes quick work of that. When we go into a new region, go into a new country, we spend probably a couple of weeks or a month training our machine learning to look at the differences in those areas, because the canopies look different, trees are different. And that would be completely impossible to do in a manual format. Although we interject some manual processes, if, we do an evaluation of a farm and something on that evaluation shows something that, AI is not 100% accurate, that the farmer doesn't agree with, they can start an appeal process and we bring people in to do some manual intervention and take a look at what makes sense and make sure that we're doing the appropriate evaluation for the farm. But 99.9% of the work is the machine.
And you've talked about this a bunch, but I just want to paint the context for the listeners. So the EU has deforestation goals set for 2030, and you've mentioned already that essentially anyone outside the EU will not be able to export goods if they can't prove that they adhere to these 2030 deforestation goals. Is there anything else I'm missing, or is there anything else that you would like to add to kind of like paint to the picture of what these new targets are?
Well, the goals differ depending on the country. The EU has one set legislation, and the legislation says there can be no deforestation as per the UN's definition of deforestation after the end of 2020. And on the 7 commodities that I mentioned, those are the first commodities that they're enforcing the regulation on starting at the end of December this year. And so let's say a chocolate company who buys chocolate through traders may not have had a relationship with the farms. There's a long supply chain from the farms to a chocolate bar being created in Europe. And so tying all that information together is new. There are millions, tens of millions of farms in the world that are involved in cocoa. And we need to make sure that they comply not only with the new European law, but part of the European law says that they also must comply with the local law. So if Colombia, where there's a lot of cocoa, or Ghana has a local law about deforestation, not only do we need to comply with EU, we need to comply with all the local laws. So our AI needs to have the ability to do that evaluation. The other component is there's a risk mitigation component. So the farmer needs to create a due diligence statement. So we automatically create that due diligence statement. And if they have risks, they can talk about the risks in their due diligence statement and their risk mitigation plan. And so we'll go work with them and say, yeah, maybe they had some deforestation and there's ways to mitigate that. So we'll help them mitigate it so that they don't get banned from exporting to a market. So it's a big part of what we do. The other component is that all of the certificates, which we'll create next year, and even this year when people are getting set up, get paid for by DMTR. So somebody can buy with US dollars or euros or whatever they want, but we'll convert it within our treasury. And then we use the blockchain as we're writing that. So once the evaluation is done, we write it to blockchain. So we're writing it right now to Polygon. We've got another project where we partnered with Open Food Chain, and we're writing it to Komodo for that project. We can write it to Ethereum. And so we're exploring what other chains are we going to write it to, and maybe in Asia, Binance, it makes more sense for us. But I think there's an integration point with multiple blockchains. Some of the partners are open to public blockchains, and some of them need to have certain levels of privacy. So there's a decision making and a design process, but we've built our platform to be blockchain agnostic so that we can integrate with many blockchains depending on what the clients want. So if, a European company already has an Ethereum based blockchain, we can integrate with their blockchain versus forcing them to Polygon or something else.
Very cool. And you kind of answered my next question a little bit with your response, but this is maybe a little bit of a spicy question. But this has always been at the top of my mind. And this is why I was super excited to have you come join the podcast, because you're in the trenches and you can provide just a succinct, good answer. And I'm going to put on my anti-blockchain hat here for a second. What are the solutions that a decentralized database offers these farmers and these emerging countries that are, as they grow their economies and they enter into this new economic era? What are the benefits that blockchain offers that a centralized database can't?
Yeah, I think to an extent you can debate what you can do and can't do, but some of the advantages are an immutable record. So the farmer gets an immutable record. Nobody can tamper with it. There is in the food trade, as well as probably every other supply chain in the world, some amount of fraud. And so that's a fraud reduction tool to us using that immutable record. Two, having an open blockchain allows transparency across the supply chain, and some customers may even share it right with their consumers. I did a project a couple of years ago on blueberries where they wanted to share information right down to the consumer. And so blockchain does create an advantage for that. From a security perspective, it certainly creates different advantages. And then from a banking perspective, not everybody has the ability to pay for things. So we do different things within our platform, like trade loans. A farmer may not be able to afford his deforestation certificate, but if he offers a payment when he receives payment for his coffee, then we can back pay that certificate. We don't want anybody to not be able to comply, but there's always a point where there needs to be some level of monetary transfer. The other thing is we pay some of our users for their data. So, there's a ton of data we collect on planting and growing and pests and weeds and things like that. We analyze all that with our AI. It creates value for us to give feedback to a farmer to say, this is how you should manage this pest or disease. Here's some things you can do to increase your output on your crop. That's valuable to us. And if they want to be able to share that data so that we can share it with other farmers or universities, we can get compensated for that. And we can share some of that revenue back to the individual farmer, and they can buy services like a deforestation certificate with that. Or they can take it to a crypto network and convert the DMTR into whatever their local currency is, if that's their choice.
Very cool. Those are a lot of use cases that I hadn't imagined, mostly because I'm not in the weeds of the day-to-day of ag tech and ag supply chain. So I was very much looking forward to asking you that question. Can you share a little bit about how the name Dimitra came to be and how you kind of decided to focus on these verticals when choosing what business to go into? I don't think very many people think ag tech is the vertical to go into. So if you could just share more about the genesis of Dimitra, what it means, and kind of like how you and your team ended up focusing on these areas, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of my career working in supply chains in food and agriculture and automotive and energy all over the world, and implementing systems in order to make them more efficient. I would say in, I don't know, 2018 or so, I was engaged in Africa in order to register farmers, and they wanted to see if they could use a blockchain for that. So I built a blockchain platform, and in 2020 that came out, and essentially it was a registration identity type platform. And we collected information about 1 million farmers. And so that was the first test. When I got invited to a meeting in Africa, in Congo, where they had a big conference, and I got to speak to lots of people in Africa, some of the challenges they had around traceability and how do they compete with a lack of information. So in North America and Europe, a lot of the companies and farmers have access to technology. And at that point in Africa, there was much less access. And, I'll give you an example. One of the conversations I had was around cattle, and Ugandan cattle. A farmer can raise a cow and sell it for $600 or $1,000. But if they can get it on a boat or get the beef on a boat and send it to, the Middle East or Europe or North America, they get $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for that head of cattle. Now, the challenge in doing that is they have export regulations, and they have to have a record of the cow from birth and, some of the health issues and all of the traceability issues associated with that. And they have a lack of those records, and all over the world, those records are produced fraudulently in order to get more dollars for a cow. And the goal for a farmer is I'm raising crops and I'm raising animals either to feed my family or make money. Those are the two things. And so we decided we would help solve some of those problems. I was building other blockchains in the medical space and energy space and thought, okay, we'll build an agricultural blockchain to deal with those traceability issues and those regulatory filing issues for Africa. So then it led us to, what does that look like? We put a team together. Many of those team members are still with us. They've been with us since 2021 when we officially incorporated Dimitra. And we looked at what could our names be. And I don't know, one day I was looking at Demeter, the Greek goddess of the harvest, and read a piece of something, I don't know, Wikipedia, saying that Dimitra or Demeter, depending on the language, role was to teach people to have a better crop or a better harvest, and thought that was perfect. Went on to GoDaddy and looked, can I get the name? Yeah, Dimitra.io, bought it. And then we started the branding cycle and how do we build that brand out? So for me, it aligns perfectly. If Dimitra helps people have a better harvest.
Love the genesis of the name. You spoke about this in your response. And when I was digging through Dimitra, I noticed that there's just a lot of different teams that are under the umbrella of the Dimitra brand. So can you share more about the how extensive your different types of teams are and what they're working on?
Yeah, so we're close to 150 people. We probably have 70 external salespeople, contract people as well. So at some points we're well over 200 people. We have a design team, and that design team has a number of designers and researchers and agronomists who look into what we need to build into the projects. And so over the years, we've been dabbling with what markets can we play in. And we started with two products, a livestock product and an agriculture product. So we have Dimitra Connected Farmer, which essentially is a product that does that farm to fork right from planting a seed all the way through harvest and then beyond that. And then we have a livestock guru product, which is really focused today on cattle, although it's called livestock. The primary use of the product is cattle. So we have these teams who work on individual projects. And so each project may have 3 to, 25 people on the project, depending on how big it is, how broad the scope is, how much technology is involved. And then we've got, dedicated AI people, dedicated mobile people who are making it work on Android phones because farmers around the world use Android phones. And then, a technical team, a sales team, and a marketing team, and all of the support you need to run a company.
You mentioned the Connected Farmer platform, and I was kind of curious to hear about the other features that it offers because you just gave one specific use case. So what are the types of reports that this app provides? Things like crop recommendations and other sorts of features that these farmers now have access to through the Connected Farmer platform.
Yeah. So if you get onto the Connected Farmer platform, the very first thing you do is register your farm and you create a polygon or a geofence around your farm. The second we create a polygon around your farm, we go off and we run satellite reports on your farm. So that's an automated process. A couple hours after requesting those reports, you can get, if you're in the base model, 5 satellite reports. And if you're in the advanced, you get 23 satellite reports that look at your crop health. They look at your moisture levels. They look at risk for burn, sunburn and things like that. And essentially they give you a report saying, this is the status of your farm today. And it can be as simple as a red, yellow, green report. You are showing blue, for example, on a moisture report, your farm has adequate moisture. But if you're showing red, you don't have adequate moisture around your farm. And then you need to do things to rectify that. All right. So are you picking a crop that works well with the moisture level you have? We do NDVI reports and Recce reports, which allow us to evaluate using AI the performance of a crop through a growing season. And how does that compare to other farms in your area? And how does that compare to other farms around the world? Are you in the upper percentile where you're going to have very good crop performance down to lower percentiles? You can load data. So if you have a soil sensor, you can load data about your soil. And if you say, I am growing carrots, we have built all of the material on 60 crops into our app, and it'll look at that and say, what's your nutrient levels, your phosphorus levels, what's your acidity of the soil, and does that match the crop? And if it doesn't, what should you be doing about that? Adding a certain fertilizer, managing your soil differently from a soil prep perspective. We have a little tool where you can ask about diseases. You can take a picture of a leaf of a plant, and we can evaluate what disease is affecting your plant. We have advice about how to deal with pests. And then the AI, as you start entering more and more information, takes that information and starts compiling differences using information from your farm and information that we've gathered from universities and wherever we've got the information to make different types of recommendations. So that's the first piece of the app. And then you can go into the app and start setting your goals, and we can start helping guide you towards hitting your farming goals. And then you can move into, like we have in some areas, in some countries of the world, we have the financial tools. So now we have an area where we can evaluate your farm. And if you say, I want to be an avocado farmer, and this came out of the genesis of the Alma project that we're doing in Kenya, we can do an evaluation on whether your farm is well suited to growing avocados. And if it is, we give you a great score. If it isn't, we give you a great score and say, here are the areas that you need to work on. Maybe that's irrigation or soil additives that you can use, or your farm is just not suited to growing avocados because it freezes in the winter or whatever the case may be. We actually sell that tool to banks. So an individual bank who issues a lot of loans can come in and say, I want avocado reports for Kenya, and we'll give them access to that, and they can download that and evaluate if they're giving loans to farmers. We also give loans to farmers through crypto. And when a farmer takes one of those, we don't necessarily hand them money. We actually give them the seedling. We give them the windbreak tree. We give them the fertilizer. We give them the sensors in order to set it up. We send them out with agricultural experts. If they're transitioning from carrots and onions to avocado, which generates more revenue, we want to make sure that they're successful. So there's training that you can do on your phone. There's expertise that we give you access to. And then we're working in East Africa with a very large cooperative that has, I think, 57,000 avocado farmers. And avocado can change the financial condition for a local farmer. A lot of farmers are stuck earning, less than a living wage, growing crops that don't produce great revenue, but create a lot of work that they could integrate if they could afford 10 or 20 avocado trees into their farm. And if you look at an avocado tree, you take an individual farmer there might make $500 to $2,000 a year. If we put, like we did some farms recently, we did 1,000 trees as part of our pilot last year. So if you take a tree, when it's mature, that tree will produce 300 or 400 kilos of avocados, one tree. And 400 kilos of avocados will produce at today's market rate about $600. So planting and caring for one tree or 3 trees may match the entire revenue that they're getting from their farm. Trees require less care over the years, so it's something that they can take on and plant onions between the rows. We've got people that we've put 50 and 100 trees on their farms as part of this trial. 100 trees will take that farmer or that farming family over a decade from a couple $1,000s in revenue to $50,000 in revenue. And that farmer can never afford to take 100% of their annual revenue to start planting these avocado trees and get all of the stuff they need in order to do it successfully. So you take, crypto investors around the world, whether they're retail or commercial, and you start working these projects and say, maybe you take $50, you buy a tree, give it to your spouse as a gift. And the farmer will go into the app a couple times a year and take pictures of that tree, and that'll get routed to you so you know how your tree's doing. And when it's mature enough, it'll start producing revenue. And maybe in the first couple of years, your revenue is quite low, but a lot of people can afford $50. I went through this and went through it, told my mother about it. My mother said, I don't even care if I get the revenue. I just want to help the Kenyan farmer. And so not everybody's like my mom, but kudos to my mom for wanting to do that. The idea of creating this type of investment is appealing to the farmer, but also appealing to the government. So now we're working with the Ministry of Agriculture or Federation of Agriculture over there. We've signed a deal now in Brazil with a national government association and the state of Roraima. So starting this year, we'll be doing citrus, acai, and cacao. Same thing in Brazil. We're expanding that to other areas of Brazil right now. We've got a project being developed right now in Indonesia for cattle, and some other projects in Peru and Colombia that will be using the same platform. So software development for us then also becomes project development. So we've got to run the project in Brazil, which is working with them, which is finding the farmers, which is evaluating if the farm is suitable, working with local crowdfunding companies who are licensed to go out and work with these farmers and sell an investment and document the investment and to make sure that everything's covered off, working on the risk mitigation and the communication. So it's really fun to do that. And so that's all AI driven. But what's different than most of my career has been, going and working with a company, and there's a people piece to that. I think there's some extra value for me. My grandfather was a farmer. I worked on his farm as a child. It was not illegal child labor though. And essentially, it's really quite valuable to hear the stories and see the stories and meet the farmers and see the change we can make with the artificial intelligence and crypto.
That's super fascinating. I've never thought about giving a gift of an avocado tree to a farmer, but to be able to see the metrics and the yield from that, just by following that tree on the Dimitra platform sounds incredibly gratifying, especially for somebody who enjoys to donate funds and money to good causes. I have a feeling I already know the answer to this question, but what has retaining your clients, your farmers, your government partners, what does that look like? Do they continue to sign the dotted line every year to keep working with Dimitra? And what does growth look like? Are you seeing growth kind of exponentially? Is it through word of mouth? Can you just share a little bit more about retaining customers and clients and how you guys are growing?
Yeah. So we only started in 2021. The platform in its first iteration came out in 2022 for coffee. Those clients are still on board, the ones that we started with, and for cattle. So we haven't lost a customer over that. As we continue to develop features, we get more and more clients. And right now we have an abundance of work where, I just promoted our head of Latin America to be the chief operating officer because we're taking on projects faster than we can deliver on them. So we need to have this new operational department. We've got 25 or 30 really active projects right now around the world in over 20 countries. And we have a sales team of 70 people who are knocking on doors, signing up. We probably sign a new deal every week or two right now. And then when you look at deforestation may be one of the biggest supply chain events in modern history. There will be a requirement when deforestation reporting is mandatory next year for tens of millions or hundreds of millions of transactions. We're the only blockchain tool that does deforestation certifications. And we're one of just a handful of companies who offer the full suite from the first mile all the way to, the roaster, the consumer, the manufacturer in the EU. There's a lot of satellite companies out there who do evaluation of deforestation, but they don't do all of that agricultural component. They don't have the people on the ground to deal with some of the challenges associated with it. We are having people sign up and they may not want to sign up for Dimitra, but we have corporations right now who have their own software and they're using our APIs. So, they run it within their own platform. They are evaluating the forest within their own platform. And every time they run a report, we get paid $1 or whatever the deal is on that API call. We have large corporations we're doing integrations with right now. There'll be some announcements probably in the next year when this becomes more prevalent after the law goes to ground in 2025. But, massive Fortune 500 companies that are using our API or evaluating our software now. So lots of opportunity there. And so everything deforestation related is related to DMTR. And if the government or the corporation says we don't trade in cryptocurrency, they pay a little more. People who are paying DMTR get a discount. And then if they paid me in US dollars or paid us in US dollars, our treasury converts that. So if they pay $50,000, we go to an exchange and buy $50,000 of DMTR back. And on some of our projects right now, we've actually got some burn going. So there is additional, depending on the project and the project budgets, money set aside to burn some DMTR. So it helps us with our deflationary metrics.
What a killer use case for a blockchain that I don't think I for certain would not have thought that deforestation would be a killer use case for a blockchain with forthcoming tens of millions to hundreds of millions of transactions a year as it pertains to these certifications and verification and authentication when it comes to ensuring that the very base layer of the farm to table or farm to whatever is indeed ensuring that there is no deforestation. So I can't imagine, you have Ethereum, it has a ton of activity going on it. You have Bitcoin, it has tons of activity going on it. But maybe like a Cosmos chain or an L2 or an alternate L1, this would be a dream partnership to be able to onboard Dimitra and for Dimitra to use that chain for these looming transactions that will be coming in 2025 and beyond. So when you guys are evaluating different blockchain networks to support or to use, what are you looking at? I noticed you mentioned earlier that some of your clients want enterprise chains, consortia chains. Others are fine with public chains. What's the criteria that you guys evaluate when integrating support for a new blockchain?
So I guess the first criteria comes down to what does the customer want? What are they looking for in a chain? We are not tied to many chains. Our base data collection chain is Polygon, and we chose Polygon because it was close to Ethereum. It was cheap, and we've been looking at doing wrap tokens and maybe being able to fund it that way. Today, there's a conversion or a treasury activity in order to do that. But having an inexpensive transaction fee is quite important. The Komodo chain that we just did a project on really came out of our partner organization, Open Food Chain in Europe, and they were building a Komodo blockchain for their system. So we did an integration in order to transfer the data. So we have a project with them with 4,000 farms in Peru and Colombia, where Helvetas, which is a big NGO, engaged us and are using the Dimitra platform to capture sales information, farm location information, and deforestation information. We take all of that, write it to the cloud, and then we auto transfer it to the Komodo blockchain, because that was their decision. They wanted that for different reasons. And a lot of my career has been that way. I know quite a bit about blockchain. I'm not the greatest expert on blockchain, but every customer makes decisions differently. I often get asked, why am I on Ethereum? Ethereum's so expensive. And my answer to that is I have contracts with governments who will let me be on Bitcoin or Ethereum or not get the contract. When we started, we chose Ethereum for that reason. It was a great tool for us. It doesn't meet our expense criteria. So we do roll-ups. We don't have to transfer every deforestation report in one shot. We can transfer many deforestation reports in one shot. Particularly farmers have to create a report at a regular frequency. 570 million farms in the world. Not all of them ship to Europe. Not all of them ship to deforestation regulated countries, but they all have a requirement for reporting. At COP 2 years ago, 150 nations signed up to have a deforestation system like what's going on in Europe in their country by 2030. So EU went first. So it's a very large number of nations. The the US is working on legislation. They put some through a couple of years ago, didn't pass. They've rewritten it now. It's going forward again this year, but they've signed the pact in order to comply with deforestation. It will be a US version of deforestation law, but they're working on having that out this year. And nation by nation by nation, everybody's got a plan from now to 2030 of how they're going to achieve it.
I am super, and first of all, I want to caveat this with, we have a little bit of time left, and I'm really interested in delving into two topics, but I think I'll lean into one. First, you already mentioned a little bit of the DMTR token and kind of the tokenomics and how it operates and how you guys use it as basically the base currency for the Dimitra app and ecosystem. So I'll let the listeners kind of DYOR and delve into the DMTR token themselves. Super fascinating stuff that you guys are doing with that token and to give it utility. But since you've already spoken a little bit about that, I kind of want to dig into, while we still have you, the Incubator program that Dimitra runs. Not only does it offer grants, but I would also imagine that maybe there's additional technical support that is shared between the 150 plus folks that are working at Dimitra with the folks who are submitting projects to the incubation program. So could you just, while we still have you, share a little bit more about that program and maybe a product or two that's come out of it, and then maybe also some folks you would like to hear from to apply to that program?
Yeah. So let's go back to the Kenya example. A couple of years ago, we started talking to a small organization in Kenya. They're called 1 Million Avocados. And their goal is to plant 1 million avocado trees in East Africa because they believe in the economic changes that makes within their environment, that avocados really fits. Our African director, Victor, came back to me after talking to them and told me how dynamic the young president of that company was and how passionate he was. And so I talked to Kevin and saw that passion, and he had many ideas of what he wanted to do. He wanted to take technology to the farmers, but a technology like Dimitra costs millions, tens of millions of dollars to build. The AI is quite expensive to build. So we created a licensing opportunity for him. He didn't have money to pay for that upfront. So he said, okay, you can have it for free, and we'll go and help you use the tool. And from that, a number of initiatives have spawned. He he's got this tree sale program that we came up with in order to help the farmers. He's using the app in order to do evaluations on the farms and go out in his consulting business and help the farmers be more successful as farmers. He has a harvesting business. So he'll go and harvest your farm. And what we've done is we've paid for sensors for him. And the sensors are $7,000 a piece, some of them, to evaluate avocado quality so that he can market the farmer's avocados and get more dollars for them or more shillings for them. And then what we do is we build all of that into the app. So he's got a web interface that he uses. He's got a team that uses our app. And then we walk through different business development cycles. So harvest, we have a new trial coming, which is trade financing. How do you take the farmers who can't necessarily afford to wait for a couple months to pay and create a trade financing scenario where the first trial we're running is just one sea container, but a sea container is 20 tons. It's $1.50 US kilo. There's a bunch of expenses associated with that. The farmer is much better earning $1.50 a kilo than about a quarter to a third of that he earns in Kenya. And so we'll make the loan with the security of the payment coming back through the platform. And then we strip off the loan that we've made and give the rest back to the farmer. So that's probably his third initiative. We've funded all of that, tens of thousands of dollars in funding for him to build these different initiatives and go out and market them. And yes, some of that comes back to the Dimitra from an investment perspective. Those are the types of companies that we're working with. We'll give a cooperative who maybe can't afford the licensing fee for Dimitra and say, don't pay us the licensing fee. Here's a grant and you can use it for free for a year or for 2 years. And then when the benefits start rolling in, like, in Indonesia, we did an soil evaluation and found that the pH of the soil was so low that they weren't getting good yields on their farm. We had a similar project in South America. And those are areas where we can work with a local partner, maybe put some fertilizer into the deal. And if you've got 1,000 farms and they each need $500 worth of fertilizer, we can throw that together, put it out there and recoup that investment later. We do projects with NGOs and other governmental organizations where, again, they struggle. So we negotiate deals where maybe we can earn money down the line and create an ecosystem partner. And then we go just simple, where we did a project in Papua New Guinea last year and very large farm. They were heavily affected by a pest called fall armyworm that previously had wiped out 50% of their crop. And one of the strategies that we came up with to deal with that was precision spraying. So we got some drones, could do spectral imagery on the farm, evaluate the pockets of the fall armyworm, and then a second drone with a sprayer was programmed to go out and spray just the areas that are affected by fall armyworm and reduce the loss from 50% to 20% in the first year. There's some investment there. You got to buy some drones. The drones are $25,000, $30,000 a piece. You've got to train people in order to use them. You've got to build the ability to precision spray. And I don't want to be a drone operator around the world. So we want to create incubator partners or partners around the world who own their own little drone business and help the firms in their area. They can go out and charge whatever number of dollars per hour in order to do that and do precision spraying and precision analytics and feed all of that data back to the Dimitra platform, which feeds back the maps of where to spray and things like that. So lots of different use cases. But really it's about applying technology to specific crops and in some cases cattle.
Jon, I was so looking forward to this conversation to talk about ag tech because I think it's a hidden sector for a lot of innovation. And I also really appreciate how Dimitra is using NFTs and its own cryptocurrencies to provide some sort of incentive structure for degenerates or people who care about this sort of stuff to kind of invest a little bit of their own capital resources to help folks in different parts of the world become better farmers using new technology. So this conversation definitely did not disappoint. What is the best way for folks who are interested in reaching out to you or to Dimitra to contact you?
Yeah. So if you go to our website, dimitra.io, there is a social media tree there that has all of our contact, all of our social media, and everything. I think the email of all of our leadership team is there, as well as you can get me occasionally on Twitter or different places like that. If you want to DM me, I do get involved in some of the socials, Telegram, Twitter, and LinkedIn for the most part. I don't follow them all, just from a time perspective. And then the other thing, as people are making decisions around the crypto component of this and the technology component, we are probably one of the most active AI projects in the world. And so we do attract people who are just interested in that AI technology, and we sell our AI as well. So that's a big component. I know AI is very popular in crypto right now. We haven't marketed that in the past, but now we're trying to spend more time talking about our AI just because of the interest levels. So I just want to put that out there.
Totally. Well, Jon, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for spending an hour with us today. Definitely looking forward to keeping my finger on the pulse and following Dimitra moving forward. So I just want to thank you so much for joining the Smart Economy podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a great hour, and hopefully I get to talk to you more in the future.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Cheers.
Thank you. Take care.
Well, what did you think of that conversation? I found so much of what Dimitra is working on to be completely fascinating, from the new economic paradigms they're leveraging with blockchain to how technology can have an almost immediate impact on not only the farmers, but also government entities, banks, and other partners they collaborate with. It was also incredible to hear Jon's estimates that on-chain deforestation-related transactions can reach into the tens or hundreds of millions of transactions in the coming years. And it was so cool to hear about the specific instances that can improve farmers' lives, such as planting avocado trees and yielding those crops, and how these farmers can learn more about these and different types of opportunities through the information that's available on the Dimitra application. To keep up to date with the podcast, please head over to www.smarteconomypodcast.com. And if you've liked the guests that we've had on the show, please consider showing support by rating and reviewing the show on your favorite podcasting platform. Every rate, review, and comment helps us get this podcast in front of more people's ears and eyes. And of course, if you're a NEO token holder, please consider voting for NEO News today as your council representative. We've proudly been serving the NEO ecosystem since 2017, and will continue to do so by putting portions of our council rewards directly back into ecosystem growth initiatives. With all that said, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Smart Economy podcast, and we look forward to catching you next time.